When I was in high school, I rode horses competitively and would often go to a local barn to practice. The way the place was set up was that there was a covered arena, and then right across from it was a huge barn that you could see straight through. Anyway, one night it was getting pretty late, but the sun was just setting due to it being summer. I was riding my horse alone on the arena except for one other man, who was doing his own thing. The handymen were feeding the horses in the big barn, so every time I'd ride by I'd watch. Since the sun was setting I could only see their silhouettes due to the poor lighting. Now, I don't believe in anything supernatural, so the next part really freaked me out. As I rode by the barn, I saw a handyman crossing the walkway. Except, halfway through, the form appeared to turn into a dog and lay down. It took me a second to process what I saw, and the next time I rode by there was just a dog lying in the middle of the walkway. Needless to say, this really freaked me out. I knew I had seen a man, and now it was a dog. I stopped riding, didn't bother washing down my horse, loaded him up, and drove home. When I got home I went out to our own barn to rinse him off and let him graze for a while before putting him up. My own dogs, German Shepherds, were all in the barn, which was weird because we usually let them in at night. As soon as I enter they start barking and my big guy, Poco, started nipping at my heels, which was very out of character for him. Another one of my dogs, Louie, just sat near the barn door staring out into the darkness, very alert. Obviously at this point I'm incredibly on edge, thinking maybe someone had been in there, trying to steal our horses, which would explain why my dogs were being so aggressive, and why Louie was on such a lookout. I go into my house to wash up and ask my parents if they had seen anyone, and they're all around the kitchen table looking at pictures from one of our motion sensor deer feeders. The pictures show one of our goats being mauled by a mange-y coyote, no, not a chupacabra, and eaten. Again, very weird because our dogs are very good at keeping a watch out. Needless to say the whole night was very creepy and to this day I'm convinced that the coyote and dog/human I saw at the barn are the same animal. I'm a rational person who doesn't believe in supernatural shit, so for a long time I questioned what I'd really seen. However, it all seemed very real at the time, so I'm convinced it did. My family and I have been renting our current home for almost a year. We sign a new lease next month. When we moved in, we were unaware that the previous owner passed away in this home, but we were informed months after living here when we asked our landlord about its history. For about 4 months now, all 6 of us have experienced some weird/unexplained/creepy shit. Personally, I have seen black shadowy type figures in the corner of my eye. When I look towards the movement there is nothing there. I have felt cold spots in the home quite frequently. Seen the curtains move slightly, etc. I would always tell my husband about it, but he said I was making it up. Recently, he finally acknowledged the fact that something weird has been going on here. He has now started seeing the same stuff I've been seeing. Just now, I am sitting at the breakfast nook in front of where our kitchen bar is. Husband is on the couch in front of me. My 19-year-old is in the main dining room behind the kitchen. Us 3 are the only people home. I have a plain view of his bedroom door. And here's the creepiest thing I have seen so far. I watched his door handle move downward and his door very slowly opened. My entire body froze up. I tried to tell my husband what was happening but I couldn't even speak. And my entire body is filled with goosebumps. After I regained my composure I walked to my son's bedroom and as I knew it, no one was there. I am completely freaked out RN and can't even go back inside the house. Currently sitting on my back deck. Haunted apartment/old Sears factory. Not sure how to start this off since I've never made any posts on Reddit before. I made this account just to share this story specifically. Just know that this will be a long one and I'm sorry if I'm a bad storyteller. I'm from Dallas TX and I used to be a security guard for a place called Southside on Lamar. I will call it Soul from now on. It's just minutes away from downtown and it's also where a lot of low-key celebrities live like Andre 3000 and Erykah Badu's son 7 and many others. So this place used to be an old Sears factory in the early 1900s. I've heard stories from coworkers about people jumping off the roof and other means of suicide and just overall how haunted and scary the place was, but I would just laugh it off and pay it no mind. Until I started to see and hear things for myself that I couldn't explain. One July afternoon I was patrolling inside of the building doing my daily log and I heard a loud gunshot come from inside of Seoul. There was an old handicapped resident who had just taken his life and I was one of the people allowed to go inside and document what I had seen and not touch anything, of course. The Dallas police headquarters is literally across the street, so they showed up pretty quick along with the ambulance. Needless to say it was very traumatic and my boss let me take 2 weeks off. So my 2 weeks is up and I returned to work and everything was fine for a while, nothing out of the ordinary. Then I was assigned to work the overnight shift, which I really didn't want to do, but I accepted because it paid like $2 extra per hour. My first night I stayed outside of Seoul. I was supposed to walk all throughout the building for my daily log, but I just couldn't work up enough courage to do it, so I just wrote BS down as if I did my job. My second night I did go inside and I had one of the scariest experiences ever. I wish I could post photos in here to give you guys a better idea of what I'm talking about. There was this daycare center on the first floor that residents can take their kids to, I guess, while they were at work, and the place is very old, so old that there was a bomb shelter in the daycare that looked like a sewage tunnel, and I've heard about a kid dying in that bomb shelter. I forgot how exactly. Anyway, as I was walking up to the entrance of the daycare, I could hear something inside. The best way I can describe it is it sounded like someone trying to aggressively open a bag of chips. It was around 2 to 3 a.m., so there wasn't supposed to be anybody in there, and the door was locked. The noise got a bit louder, so I turned on my flashlight and opened it, and the noise suddenly stopped. I didn't see anything or anyone in there. It was pitch black. I shut the door, locked it, and got the hell out of there. I told my boss about it and he laughed and said it could have just been the pipes, so to not seem crazy I agreed, but I knew deep down that was not it. It just didn't sound like anything I've heard before. A lot of really old doors and windows that lead to nowhere are still inside the building. If you're from Dallas, I recommend you check the place out yourself. There's a few more scary stories I got from Soul. If y'all are interested, please message me. I feel like I've taken up enough of you guys' time. Thanks for reading. God bless. Ghost of Lady in Abandoned Hospital that I used to. Hello, my name is Nicole. I'm 28 years old. As a child, my father was a security guard and he had a job working the night shift at an abandoned hospital. From what I've read, the hospital opened in 1988 and closed in 2003. My father started working there as the night shift security in 2004. I've always been close with my father and he would bring me with him to work. He would just sit on the computer between rounds and would let me explore the abandoned buildings that made up the hospital. I had many paranormal experiences during the time he worked there as the night security guard. From 2004 to 2011, saw a bunch of things. If you guys want to hear about the other things I saw there, let me know. This one stands out because it was my first experience there. I was exploring and I had wandered into the old ICU when I heard humming coming from one of the rooms. I walked in there and I saw a young woman, probably about 20, with long black hair and blue eyes, sitting on the bed. She was very pale and wearing a hospital gown. I saw her and immediately froze just looking at her. She quickly realized that I was looking at her and she turned her head and looked at me. When we made eye contact, she smiled at me and said, "Hi, little girl," then disappeared. I think she was just a lost spirit, one of many that was in that hospital. As I said, I saw many other apparitions in that hospital, including seeing her again multiple times. Let me know what you guys think and if you want to hear some of my other experiences. I am the eldest of 3 siblings, and of course as we moved house to house I got the basement bedroom most times. I was fine with this being the eldest. This let me have privacy. The last home I lived in with my family before I moved out on my own, I spent 5 years in the basement bedroom. Through those 5 years I experienced amazing night terrors and sleep paralysis on a very regular basis. There were a few incidents where I would wake up and the closet on the far side of the room would be open just a crack, and I'd stare at it knowing I had closed it, and it would creak open just a touch more, then after what would seem like hours slowly close and click shut. Not a slam, not a regular door close, a very slow methodical one, if that makes sense. On 2 specific nights I woke up, not suddenly like something jarred me, but just kind of rolled over, and at the foot of my bed saw a girl standing there. She looked very young, black hair, dark dress, and she did not move, didn't make a sound, and I never could make out a face. Both times I reverted immediately back to being 5 years old and hid my face under the sheets while my heart rate went full marathon pace. Eventually I would feel like it wasn't there anymore and I'd peek out and it would be gone. My parents are not believers in anything paranormal and I never told them anything, thinking they would think I'm crazy. I chalked it up to night terrors and extraordinarily realistic dreams during paralysis. I moved out and far away. My next sibling in line got the coveted adult room in the basement and life went on. I had a few Christmas visits and other holiday runs, and at one point I remember going into that room to get a chair and seeing the closet door nailed shut from the outside. I didn't question it as I thought there's no way it's related to my experience. Not long after that, on another return visit home, I went and checked the door to that closet. The nails were gone, but in place was a padlock, and there was clearly bundles of sage/sweetgrass hanging above the closet and above the only exterior window in. I worked up the nerve to ask my mom what's the deal with the basement, and she reluctantly told me that my brother had seen things come in and out of the closet and that he had a girl appear beside his bed and terrorize him on several occasions. Now, no joke, I still haven't told them what I saw because I don't want them to have to move or be bothered with their basement over this. They are both retired, all kids have moved out, and they seem happy. They have also since gutted and renovated the whole basement. I've stayed there a few times now with my wife and nothing has happened. TLDR, basement bedroom growing up is either haunted or has some environmental thing going on in it to cause night terrors, and more than just me. So I used to get paid to do janitorial work in a few churches in my old hometown. Let me preface the story with this: there is nothing more nerve-wracking than being in an enormous church alone late at night. The stuff that happened in this one was so bizarre and disturbing that I still have trouble recalling it with the hair on the back of my neck raising up. It's the little things at first. You come in the day after a service and all the hymn books are turned upside down. Not just a couple, but all of them. You find handprints in weird places, bizarre graffiti, noises, etc., etc. One thing in particular happened once that really troubled me. I was headed to a dinner one time and I had just gotten off of work. I had clothes with me and I needed to change quickly. No time to get home. So I stop there, and I have my coworker with me. They come in this little side building with me. I go in this office and change. Maybe it's not ethical to do this, I don't know. My coworker walks out of the building to smoke. In a nearby bathroom, I hear this clap. Like someone punched something in mid-air. It's peculiar, but the building is old and I initially think nothing of it. I keep changing. Then I hear it again and then a loud, dramatic thud. Then, footsteps. Like someone is sneaking. They come down this hallway, then get quieter, then they run heavily to the door of the office. They stop. I am A-class freaked out. I throw open the door and there is nothing, not a thing there. Then, wham, it's like someone shoots me in the face with one of those air cannons, except it is ice cold, like bone chilling, and I freak out. I grab my clothes and half naked I run out of the building screaming for my life. I don't know what happened, but whatever it was, I was never really happy about going into that building alone again. But I did. Many times. And it wasn't the last thing that happened either. Edit. A few months ago I actually wrote up/dramatized some other stories I've read on a Reddit Tell Us Your Scary Stories thread. Feel free to read it if you want to keep being afraid, I guess. I have more that happened to me and some other I heard from other church cleaners. We're the dullest people on earth to hang out with. The secondary source stories are way weirder, but I have no way to vouch for them. For example, this one guy was telling me that he was doing some cleanup but he had to do part of it while the church was having some kind of Christmas play. He was in this back hallway cleaning up some crayon marks on the wall near the nursery when one of the singers or actresses in the play walks past him into this further back hallway. She turns a corner and then gasps, screams. He runs to see, with some other people who heard her, and she's lying on the ground shaking. They ask her what's wrong, and she says a man was standing in the middle of the hallway, ran at her, then ran through the wall and quat. Nope. Why must you bring back these memories greater than less than? I too cleaned an empty church for a while, with my mom. She wanted to take me and my brother since we weren't doing anything and also because she said it creeps her out to be in a church alone. So we drive past the Manassas battlefield, yeah, some say it is haunted, and then we pull into a creepy church with a cemetery next to it. Immediately, I feel my heart sink as light paranoia sets in. My brother and I are told to clean the upstairs and my mom cleaned the sanctuary along with the rest of the first floor. My brother and I tried not to separate. Even in daylight, an empty church can easily turn into a panic attack. We continue cleaning and vacuum the room while looking at the toys and I look out the window into the cemetery. I thought I saw something and immediately the light in the room goes off. Again, even with the sun's rays coming into the room, nothing can stop your mind from imagining what goes on in an empty church. Multiple times I ran out of rooms scared shitless. Lights would be on when we left, even though we made sure they were all off. Sometimes we would find a window open that was closed earlier that day. Our mom didn't have the strength to open those windows and my brother and I had to close them together. One day we brought a close friend to clean and as we were getting in the car, he said, "Who's that girl?" I looked up at the second-story window to see the blonde hair of a girl as she's turning away from the now open window. I pretended not to see anything as my mom, now nervous as she usually was when we left the church, told my friend to stop talking like that. We never returned after that day. It was too much for my mom, but the money was okay, which is why she stuck with it for a summer. I think that it's really just paranoia that drives these things, but even now, I'm getting a chill down my spine as I remember these incidents. TLDR, I'm never going inside an empty church again. Another I cannot personally vouch for. Later in the thread I was talking about talking to some other cleaners. This is one of theirs. He said he was curious himself about some of the weird goings on at his church, and there was this preacher coming through who talked a lot about demons and demonic activity in churches. Summary, according to him, all the demons everywhere. Anyway, these people for whatever reason decided they wanted to sleep overnight in the church just to see what would happen and quat. Nope. So the janitor hears about this and is on board. There's 4 of them. They get permission from the preacher who is like, "You're going to regret this," but they do it anyway. They decide they're going to sleep in the 4 corners of the sanctuary. So finally, it's night and they all spread out and cut the lights off. Then, not half an hour later, one of the guys, I guess a teen or a 20-something, says, "Jason," or whatever name you want here, I don't remember, Get back in your corner, man, and quat. And from across the church Jason says, I'm over here, man, and quat. And the other guy says, no you're not, you're sitting right on the other end of the pew making faces at me and quat. Long story short, no, he wasn't sitting there, no one was, and they did not spend the rest of the night in that church. Another thing that happened to me personally, there is a hallway, and at the halfway point there is a men's restroom on the left, women's on the right. I was in the men's cleaning, and as I go to wash my hands I look through the door into the women's. As I do, all 4 stall doors slam shut at the same time with enough force to shatter a mirror that was on the handicap stall door. In the grand scheme of things, this is pretty weird, but I don't understand why things like this are associated with paranormal activity. Why do incidents like this happen so often? It's not really that scary, just jarring. It's just bizarre. Either way, it was enough for me to skip that bathroom for a couple hours. I remember the day I decided I wasn't gonna be able to keep doing the cleaning alone anymore, no matter how much it paid. Was actually kind of a minor thing. I was outside sweeping, and I looked over to the part of the church where I had heard those footsteps. I saw something, I guess, looking out the window. Just something. Like a face but not really. And it was bobbing around. Window to window. I walked over to it, and of course there's nothing there. Nothing inside. But the fact that I wasn't sure anymore if it was my imagination or something actually happening to me meant that I had come too far, you know? If you're starting to think every shadow is a thing that shouldn't be there, you're losing it. I bailed. Great decision. This one I have is also outside of a church. I guess it was close. Where I live there is this enormous, gigantic abandoned temple. http://idotmgur.com/ybhw2.jpg. That's it. It's quite beautiful, quite large, and quite illegal to be in. The whole mountain is covered by different buildings. Naturally, I was drawn to it. I went with some of my friends and explored with flashlights the main building. It's the size of, say, your average retail store inside but 4 times as high. We were wandering around when we noticed on the walls all these lists of names. On the floor, in chalk, was a note that said in really bad handwriting, if your name is here leave while you can and quat. Later I found a brand new Atlanta Braves hat. Had a night like this talking to preachers about the weird stuff in their churches. Not Catholic though, so they didn't talk about exorcisms. They all had their own stories and totally believed mine without reservation. It makes sense they believe in spirits and things, I mean, it's their religion, but some of them said they wouldn't do what I do no matter what. Said they didn't go in churches alone for whatever reason. Edit, an actual example. I forgot about this one till this reminded me. This guy was telling me about how he was doing this lock-in thing. A lock-in is like a big sleepover, I guess. Like a youth group goes somewhere like the YMCA and everyone stays up doing stuff all night. Whatever, they were doing that at this church. These 3 teenage girls got to talking and left the basement of the building where everyone was, to the main sanctuary which was where no one was. No one really cared because it's teenage girls and they go off to talk a lot, you know? But then they're gone for hours and finally people are like, you know, where are those 3? So they go looking and they find these 3 girls sitting back to back to back in the sanctuary scared stiff, too afraid to move. They were all crying and they heard them whimpering like kids' Bible songs. They brought them downstairs and called their parents and they asked them what in the world they were doing up there. The preacher said it this way, they said after what they saw moving around in the back of the church they were too afraid to move. And quat. I was visiting my parents while I was in college one summer. I was taking a nap around 11 a.m. on the couch in their living room with the TV on when I was woken up by a doorknob jiggling hard upstairs. Their doors have those knobs that lock by pushing in the knob and turning, no buttons or anything on it. I assumed that my dad had locked himself in a room accidentally, as he had done it before to great comedic effect and frustration on his part. So I go upstairs, and all the doors are wide open. At this point I was a little weirded out, but I decided I was having some weird half-awake imaginary sound thing going on. I go back downstairs and turn the TV off and fall back asleep. About an hour later I'm woken up again by the sound of a doorknob jiggling, except it was on the other side of the house upstairs from the last one. I go up again and all the doors are still wide open. I called my parents at work, they ran an automobile service station at the time, and asked if either of them had been home at all that day, and both said that they were at work all day. Needless to say I got the fuck out of there. It hasn't happened since, and that was about 6 years ago. Also related, a friend and I were helping my parents move into that house, and moving a bunch of stuff into a room above the attached garage. It was a small room that could be a bedroom/study/ etc., but because the AC and heat didn't work very well in there they decided to use it as storage. There was a small closet attached to the room and when my friend and I were moving things into there, we noticed that there was a bookcase sitting in there with a note saying that we could keep it. That's when we noticed that there was the top of a doorway behind the bookcase. Again, Super creeped out. Eventually we got around to checking that door out and it just led to the attic and nothing was in there, but at the time it was super creepy and weird. Okay, so there is no other way to say it other than my house is haunted. I am usually a rational person, but my house has always given me a belief in the paranormal. I have many stories to tell, but I'll start with the most terrifying for me personally. So one night I was downstairs sitting in my computer room, which is basically a small room at the front of the house with many windows. The downstairs of my house is very interesting, as there are very few doors connecting rooms, and instead we have big opening/archway things that are hard to describe. Anyway, from my computer room you can walk into the living room and from there you can walk into the dining room. From the computer room you can see from the front of the house to the back of the house. I was sitting at my computer late at night playing a video game or something, and it was a really rainy night. It was around 2 a.m. and I was getting these really odd sensations, like something ominous was watching me from the dining room. The entire house other than my little room was pitch black, and so I could see nothing. Finally I got the most terrible feeling of my soul/spirit/whatever you want to call it being torn away from my body and watching myself from the dining room. My house had a history of really spooky things happening, so I turned my computer off quickly and started rushing to the stairs to go to my bedroom. My stairs are shaped like a T and you can go up either from the kitchen or from the entrance room, and these two sets lead to a landing, which then has another set of stairs that goes to the second floor. I am rushing up the stairs and by the time I hit the landing I start hearing and feeling something running behind me. At this point in time I am terrified, and it didn't help that when I reached the top of the stairs a huge lightning bolt struck outside one of my windows. I raced into my bedroom and slammed my door shut and immediately got into bed. Since this particular night was extra creepy, I decided to completely cover my head and everything with the bed covers, which I normally can't stand because tea makes me feel like I'm being suffocated. Just as I start calming down and feeling drowsy I feel what feels like a single finger run down my spine, and so I immediately turned the direction I felt it and saw nothing. I think stayed up the entire night paralyzed with fear. That story is the worst for me personally, but a lot of other things have happening when I have friends over. There are a lot of friends who will not sleep in my house without some type of light on, so I may tell some of these other stories later. Yeah, let's hear this shit. I'm not sleeping this week anyway. Alright, I shall tell some more. I've told these stories so many times to different people it isn't even difficult anymore. Okay, so my two best friends would always stay over on the weekend whenever we were around 13 or 14. We all had experienced terrible things from the basement, mostly strange noises. My basement is spooky even during the day, it's stone walling and the floor is cement and it looks very eerie and kind of solemn. The worst part is that it has many rooms for storage and the doors for these are always open, I don't know why, and it's always pitch black in these rooms. Anyways, the basement became infamous among my group of friends and it all started one night when I had some over to stay the night. We all heard this really odd noise coming from downstairs and my best friend Brandon went over and put his ear to the door. He said he heard what sounded like something being dragged across the floor, and he assumed it was my mom carrying a bag of pellets for our pellet stove. It was the middle of the night though and that made no sense, so we opened the door. Now the basement stairs are shaped like an L and have a landing similar to my stairs to the second floor. We could see this weird blue glow coming from the basement, but due to the way the stairs were shaped, we couldn't see what was producing it. Then we heard a loud thump and a very audible sound of feet racing up the stairs. This is when we slammed and locked the basement door and ran for cover onto the couch. From this point on we would always do thing in the basement at night for the scares. One of out activities we would do is one person would go down to the basement and another would stay upstairs. This way both people were alone for double the scariness. We had these cool walkie-talkie watches that allowed us to talk together though. We did this a few times, and we even took a video camera down with us. The basement was so dark that you couldn't see anything, but it recorded us talking and any noises we heard. One time I was upstairs and my friend Brandon downstairs and I hear him yell at me over the watch to get downstairs immediately. I race down and find him huddled in a corner with a broomstick as his weapon. He claims he heard something behind him slither, so we go upstairs to listen to the recording and clear as day you hear what sounds like something fall and then slither across the floor. It's the only time we ever got something scary happen on record, and we don't even have it anymore, which is the most disappointing. Another time, me, Brandon, and my other friend Clem were all sitting upstairs in the dark just listening for scary noises. My house is very old and so it is always creaking and moaning and cracking. But after a while you learn to separate those from the unnatural noises we always heard. Many time we heard things either in the kitchen or from the basement that made us sleep with the lights on, and there was no sleep to be had even then. But the worst was when we were all sitting on the couch in the pitch black and we were just talking casually. Brandon then says, you know what would be the scariest thing ever? If the basement door just opened and about 2 minutes later we heard the sound of the door open and then slowly shut. It's the most distinguishable noise ever, And we all just stared at each other in paralysis, as in to say, did you guys hear that too? Then we all simultaneously jolted towards my computer room, and Brandon, who was a scrawny lad, picks up my two-person love seat by himself and barricades the large entryway, and it is there we spend the remainder of the night. If I can think of any more stories I will tell them, but these are the ones that come to mind first.